What's up, folks? I'm Chris, your NFL writer here at Occupy Fantasy, here with a look at the 10-game slate for the 10th week of the NFL regular season on FanDuel, DraftKings, and Yahoo. In Week 10, our favorite play this week is the same favorite play everybody else is going to have. It is Dameon Pierce of the Houston Texans at the running back position. Pierce has the strongest role at the position out of anybody in the league. He has about 86% of Houston's team rushes over the last 3 weeks of play and 11% of team targets in that time period. Has a favorable matchup in the running game this week as well against the New York Giants. So although the Texans are the underdog side of this game here in Week 10, Pierce, especially here on DraftKings, where he's just $6,300, is going to be one of the better plays on this slate. So you want to play him in your low-risk lineups, but in the vast majority, if not all, of your high-risk lineups this week as well. Looking at the rest of the running back position in our model this week, obviously we have Pierce coming in at an astronomical 33% now here on Saturday afternoon at the running back position on DraftKings, leading FanDuel at 25% and Yahoo at 35%. Behind him, most popular running back of the week will be Travis Etienne over on DraftKings, Derrick Henry of the Tennessee Titans, Saquon Barkley on the other side of the same game as Pierce, facing the Houston Texans, will be very popular across the board this week. Alvin Kamara with his very unique, strong role in both the running and passing game for the Saints. Jamal Williams at just $5,900 here on DraftKings, another really good value play. These are the low-risk group of running backs you'll see people deploy quite heavily here in Week 10 NFL DFS contests and probably also in high-risk contests as well. Looking back at DraftKings, it does seem like one of the easier ways to differentiate in high risk this week is to play a couple of these value backs, because looking at the running back position, other than Pierce and Williams, who's down here at a healthy 16% on DraftKings, far less popular on FanDuel and Yahoo because he's much more expensive over there, it does seem like the vast majority of people are going to play these running backs in the $7,100 to $8,600 range, which means that playing some value running backs and playing some more expensive players at other positions is an interesting way to gain a little bit of leverage this week in high-risk contests. As you know, we like to start our show every single week by looking at the betting markets and seeing what we can learn from the lines this week. We have Kansas City favored by 9.5 points against the Jacksonville Jaguars at home. And we have a backfield here in Kansas City that isn't really that exciting to use. We obviously see Clyde Edwards-Helaire is averaging the most fantasy points per game here in this backfield. However, over the last 2 weeks, Andy Reid has started and played Isaiah Pacheco ahead of him on early downs. So if you were to start a Kansas City Chiefs running back this week with them favored by 9.5 points over the Jaguars, Pacheco is probably the best one to use. He's most likely to see the most rush attempts in this offense. The targets have not really been there for him since he has been playing a little bit more. He has 3 total targets on the entire season. So that is where Jerick McKinnon in the passing game plays a role for them. And then obviously Clyde Edwards-Helaire as well has been a little bit more involved in the passing game also. What is going to make this interesting going right down to the wire on Sunday afternoon is McKinnon is questionable to play. If he is not able to go, it is going to make each of Pacheco and Edwards-Helaire slightly more interesting to us. Pacheco is probably the only one I'm realistically interested in just because the price tag is $5,000 and Edwards-Helaire is priced as if he is still the starter in this backfield. But if you look at the snaps and touches recently, that is just simply not the case with the Chiefs. Other decent favorites on this slate. The New York Giants are favored by 5 points, so obviously that means we should be looking at the other side of that matchup Dameon Pierce has with Barkley against the Houston Texans rush defense. The Houston Texans have the worst rush defense in the NFL right now, according to Football Outsiders DVOA data, so Barkley in a really good spot to succeed as one of the more expensive running backs on the slate. The Las Vegas Raiders are favored by 5 points as well in their matchup with the absolutely leaderless Indianapolis Colts. No idea what's going on over there with head coaching and quarterback decisions, but does give us an opportunity to play Josh Jacobs, who also has a very strong role at the running back position on his squad. The Colts have actually one of the better rush defenses in the league thus far. However, it's one of the only things they do well. They are the 5th best rush defense in the NFL. Miami Dolphins are favored by 4 points in their matchup at home against the Cleveland Browns. However, we did see Jeff Wilson join this squad last week after a trade from the 49ers, and he earned an identical number of carries to Raheem Mostert. We saw the snaps be virtually 50% for each of them in this offense, and Jeff Wilson was more effective in the passing game. So, a little bit of a coin flip decision who to play in the Dolphins' backfield. My lean is honestly to play neither of these guys and focus on the passing game with the Dolphins. Travis Etienne, one of the more popular plays, talked about that at the beginning of the show. Etienne is going to be facing the league's 20th rush defense and the league's 26th defense defending running backs in the passing game in the Chiefs this week, so Etienne makes a ton of sense, particularly in lineups where you are stacking Patrick Mahomes with a couple of his pass catchers. Derrick Henry, in his matchup with the Denver Broncos, is going to face the 25th ranked rush defense in the NFL, and we know that the volume is certainly going to be there. An absurd 30 carries in week 7 and 8, obviously just 17 last week against the Chiefs, but he has been putting up these just astronomical numbers week in and week out, really since he was back in high school. Derrick Henry, an unstoppable force at the running back position, and there is no reason for that to change here in week 10. Alvin Kamara coming off a slightly disappointing game against the Baltimore Ravens. The Saints defense is slightly above average defending running backs in both the running and passing game. However, we know Kamara is going to have a ton of opportunities to touch the football. And getting away from ownership and just looking at raw ranking at the position, Alvin Kamara is our favorite running back play on DraftKings, and he ranks second in the Occupy model on each of FanDuel and Yahoo here in Week 10 as well. So a lot of interest in Alvin Kamara in all contest types here over at Occupy. Jamal Williams. Jamal Williams is going to be an interesting play this week because the Chicago Bears are the 28th rush defense in the NFL. That makes them the 5th worst in the league. And they are 21st defending running backs in the passing game. Jamal Williams also will benefit from the second best run blocking offensive line in front of him, protecting him this week. In this matchup against Chicago, Detroit is the underdog side of this game, but Jamal is getting the lion's share, pun intended, of the work for the Lions, with DeAndre Swift being limited, and now Craig Reynolds, the running back 3 on this roster, is on injured reserve here in Week 10. So there will be even more opportunities available for Williams, especially near the goal line, to do what he does effectively for Detroit. A little bit of late-breaking news here. The Cowboys elevated a 4th running back to their active roster here on Saturday night. Kadre Allison, according to team beat writers like Michael Galkin here, will be active on Sunday, and it's highly unlikely the Cowboys will carry 4 active running backs, so that means we are conservatively expecting Tony Pollard to draw the start once again for the Cowboys. 6,500 AR on DraftKings, 7,000 over on FanDuel. Pollard with the second best matchup of the week. Green Bay, second worst rush defense in the NFL. So also very viable in all contest formats here in Week 10. All right, that's a little bit on low risk and best running back plays here in Week 10. Where are people going in high risk contests? The highest total games on this slate are Jacksonville at Kansas City at 50.5 points, Cleveland at Miami at 48.5 points, and Detroit at Chicago at 48 points. Our favorite game to stack this week is actually Cleveland and Miami. When you look at the Occupy model at the quarterback position, we have trusted our quarterback rankings week in and week out all season long. We have a very clear indicator here that the model wants us to play Miami and Cleveland because both quarterbacks are number 1 and number 2 in our model for Week 10. Right behind them, we have Patrick Mahomes facing the Jacksonville Jaguars, Justin Fields facing the Detroit Lions. These are almost certainly the quarterbacks that we want to focus on this week in Week 10. The only other ones on here that I'm interested in are Trevor Lawrence on the other side of that Kansas City game, if you want to stack the underdog side of the highest total game on the slate. And then we also have Jared Goff on the other side of that matchup with Justin Fields. I'm going to attack this slate most likely with Tua Tagovailoa double stacks. My favorite way to bring back a Tua Tagovailoa Tyreek Hill stack is with a cheap wide receiver in the Browns offense. Going to be one of the more popular wide receiver plays overall on the slate, but for good reason. When we look at Donovan Peoples-Jones' workload in the 2022 NFL season, he is running the most routes on average for the Browns over the last 3 weeks of play. Obviously, the production has been nowhere near the level that Amari Cooper has provided, but when we can get him at $4,300 in our lineup, and that is a significant discount from Amari's $6,500, that will help us fit in the rest of what we're trying to accomplish in our lineups here in Week 10, in my opinion. We can do one of two things here in terms of getting to a 3-1 stack with the Dolphins against the Browns, the way that I'm approaching this week in high-risk contests. We can go with Mike Gesicki and stack the atrocious tight end position with our quarterback here. A little bit of a different decision here in week 10 because we do have Travis Kelce on the slate. But just for the purposes of this build, we're going to go with a Tua Tagovailoa double stack. You can go with Tyreek Hill, the highest target share wide receiver in the entire NFL right now. Mike Gesicki at tight end at just $3,500. And you've got $6,000 to finish off your lineup with another wide receiver and then another high upside player in the flex. And I think this is a really viable way to play the slate this week. You can also go to Jalen Waddle and lock down what is likely to be the majority of the targets in the passing game this week for the Miami Dolphins. You can actually go even cheaper and play Harrison Bryant, who's the starting tight end for the Cleveland Browns this week. And you can work in another mid-range to cheap wide receiver here and then another high upside flex play to finish off a Miami double stack with a Cleveland Brown run back this week. The field on DraftKings is not going to play the slate like that. They are actually going to be heavily invested in stacking the Kansas City Chiefs and the Jacksonville Jaguars game. How do we know this? Going back over to the Occupy model, we see that Patrick Mahomes here at the quarterback position is going to be the second most popular quarterback on DraftKings behind mispriced Justin Fields, who will be the most popular quarterback in low-risk contests almost certainly. Mahomes most popular over on FanDuel, second most popular over on Yahoo. Running backs in Kansas City aren't necessarily playable, but when we look at the ownership of running backs from Jacksonville, we see Travis Etienne is expected to be the second most popular play on DraftKings, third most popular on FanDuel, and inside the top 5 in terms of most popular play at the running back position on Yahoo. Wide receivers this week, we have Christian Kirk from the Jacksonville Jaguars that is going to be over 15% owned on DraftKings. We've got Juju Smith-Schuster from the Kansas City Chiefs that will be very popular at wide receiver. And at the tight end position, Travis Kelce is going to be the most popular tight end everyone plays on FanDuel and Yahoo, and the second most popular tight end everyone plays over on DraftKings. Taking all of that into account, we know that people in high-risk contests are going to have a lot of exposure to the players in this game. At least 2 of them, maybe 3 of them. Far less players utilize the very high upside 3-1 game stacks we reference extensively in our free NFL DFS strategy guide over at OccupyFantasy.com. But this week, we're probably going to see quite a bit of it, with this game being the only real standout on the slate. So by taking into account all the ownership that I just discussed with you here, Mahomes at the quarterback position, someone like Juju at wide receiver from Kansas City, we've got Travis Kelce, high upside, tight end, and then Travis Etienne at the running back position, one of the more logical run backs. Or you could go with Christian Kirk at the wide receiver position as one of the more popular wide receivers on this slate. This is definitely an approach in high-risk contests this week you're going to see DFS players utilize very, very heavily. Using some tools like the Occupy model, using our lineup builder, even just using regular fantasy point projections for players this week, you will see that the field will gravitate towards trying to figure out a way to play this game based off of how some of these players are priced. Big picture, I do like stacking Kansas City and Jacksonville this week, but the absolute stone cold lock leverage move of the week in week 10 is to stack Cleveland and Miami with similar upside, players with access to real ceilings at much lower ownership than these players in the highest total game of the week. Low risk contests. Which wide receivers are everybody playing this week? Amon-Ra St. Brown from the Detroit Lions in his matchup with the Bears. Tyreek Hill against the Browns. Deontay Johnson, too cheap against the New Orleans Saints. Talked about Juju and Christian Kirk a little bit. Darnell Mooney is also going to be catching a decent amount of ownership this week. Always Cooper Kupp. DPJ from the Browns. Mac Hollins is a little more interesting this week because the Raiders have no Darren Waller and no Hunter Renfrow, both on injured reserve. So that's opened up a little more opportunity for Hollins, maybe even Keelan Cole out of slot positions in certain looks for Derek Carr. When you look at the top 9 plays at wide receiver on DraftKings by ownership, only 2 of these players are priced above $6,000. It's Tyreek Hill with the Dolphins and Cooper Kupp with the Los Angeles Rams. So the field is absolutely going to be playing a lot of these value plays at the wide receiver position in their low-risk lineups. So we can do something with that. We can play Juju at wide receiver. We can play Christian Kirk and have a little bit of a skinny stack exposure to that game. Seems pretty likely to me the field is going to play Fields as their quarterback in DraftKings low-risk contests. And then on DraftKings, there's one of 2 directions they're going to go. Just get Kelce in there, $4,700 per player remaining to finish off your lineup, or You can play Greg Dulcich with the Denver Broncos. Dulcich is projecting specifically on DraftKings for the second highest ownership at the tight end position, tied with Foster Moreau, who's a little less expensive from the Las Vegas Raiders due to the injury situation that I just mentioned. So Dulcich or Moreau will leave you somewhere between $6,900 to $7,100 per player remaining to finish off a low-risk lineup. Travis Etienne probably finds his way in here given the projected ownership situation, and this is right here is why we know Jacksonville and Kansas City is going to be extremely popular. I've got 3 players from that game in here in a potential low-risk lineup. I've got $6,700 remaining to finish off my lineup, which means that if I want to here, I can get an even better value at wide receiver, and I can just get to Patrick Mahomes at quarterback, $5,300 remaining. You will have quite a few paths to a solid low-risk lineup this week just by following this core here over on DraftKings. On FanDuel, I don't want to give short shrift to those of you who play over there. It does seem like Pierce and Etienne are good plays. Henry is on the more expensive side, but the field is certainly going to do that at a high amount in contests this week. But when we look at Mahomes being the most popular quarterback here on FanDuel, and we look at Travis Kelce being the most popular tight end, and with the Vikings being too cheap here on FanDuel, it does seem very viable to get 2 of these high upside running backs as well with Kelce. So over on FanDuel, you will see people attacking contests somewhat like this here in Week 10. To wrap things up for you, Dameon Pierce, best play on the slate. Definitely want to put him in the majority of your lineups. Keep an eye out for our Discord Q&A at 11 a.m. tomorrow morning. That's where we will go over all of the final things you need to know for the Week 10 NFL DFS slate. The Occupy Fantasy NFL DFS plug is up live on the website for you to digest and read. We'd appreciate if you're a subscriber to go over there and check that out. Can run back the live stream that Brian and Moose did here on Saturday afternoon on our channel as well. Once again, we'd like to remind you to make sure you're subscribed to our channel if you love this content that we're putting out for you. We have a ton of videos that are coming out every single week across different sports, and you may miss some content if you are not subscribed. It may not show up in your feed. Good luck here in Week 10, and we will talk to you again in Week 11 of the NFL season.